The galaxy was in chaos. A massive solar storm, unlike anything ever recorded, had begun to sweep through the Venari system. The Venari, a small and fragile alien race, lived on the planet Anora, a world rich in life, but now doomed to destruction. The storm was merciless, tearing through their atmosphere and disrupting everything from power systems to basic communication. In the grand halls of the Galactic Union, the leaders of dozens of species gathered to discuss the crisis. After hours of debate, the conclusion was clear and cruel. Asterisk. Anora cannot be saved. Resources must not be wasted on a hopeless cause. Asterisk. The Venari's ambassador, a thin figure trembling with desperation, begged the council for aid. Please, he said, his voice cracking. We are not warriors or conquerors. We have no weapons or treasures. We only ask for life. Help us evacuate. The response was cold. The wealthier, more powerful species claimed their fleets were too busy protecting their own planets or managing more important crises. Others dismissed the Venari as too insignificant to save. Even those who sympathized felt powerless to go against the Union's decision. As the council chambers emptied, the Venari ambassador returned to his ship in silence, his people's hope slipping away. The Galactic Union had turned its back on them. Back on Anora, the Venari struggled to survive. Their cities were falling apart, their homes consumed by raging storms. Entire families huddled together, clutching each other as the skies burned orange and red. The fragile Venari bodies, unsuited for harsh environments, were failing. Many believed their extinction was inevitable. But then, when the sky seemed darkest, help arrived from an unexpected source. A fleet of human ships emerged from hyperspace, their engines roaring with determination. Humanity wasn't the most powerful or advanced species in the galaxy. In fact, many viewed them as reckless newcomers who acted first and thought later. But where others saw the Venari's plight as a lost cause, humans saw an opportunity to do what they did best: fight for survival, not just for themselves, but for others. Commander Reed, the leader of the human fleet, stood on the bridge of his ship. His sharp eyes scanned the storm-wrecked surface of Anora on the monitors. "Begin rescue operations," he ordered. "We're not leaving until every Venari we can save is off that planet." "But, sir," a crew member hesitated. "Our ships aren't equipped for their physiology. The Venari can't survive long in our atmosphere without medical modifications. And the storm." "I didn't ask for excuses," Reed interrupted. "Start the work. If their lungs can't handle our ships, then we'll build what they need. If the storm pushes back, we push harder." The Venari, watching from their crumbling shelters, couldn't believe their eyes. Shuttles descended from the human ships, braving the deadly winds. Humans in reinforced suits rushed into the chaos, carrying Venari children, elders, and injured adults to safety. One Venari elder whispered to another, "Why are they here? No one else came." "I don't know," the other replied, awe filling their voice. "But they haven't turned their backs on us." As the humans worked tirelessly against the storm, it became clear to the Venari: humanity had chosen to stand by them when everyone else had left. The rescue efforts on Anora were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. While others had fled, the humans stayed, determined to save the Venari no matter the cost. Commander Reed had given the order, and his crew moved with unwavering focus. But the challenges were far greater than they had anticipated. The Venari, a delicate species, couldn't breathe human air for long. Their biology was sensitive to temperature, oxygen levels, and even the vibrations of human ship engines. As the first group of Venari refugees was brought aboard, several collapsed almost immediately, gasping for breath. In the medical bay, Dr. Lane, the ship's chief physician, worked tirelessly to stabilize them. She adjusted oxygen levels, modified ventilators, and improvised filters to create a safe environment. "We need to retrofit the entire ship," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "If we don't, they'll never survive the journey." Engineer Carter, The chief mechanic overheard her and groaned. Retrofitting. With what resources? We're already running low on supplies. Then we make do, Reed said firmly. Strip non-essential systems if you have to. This isn't about comfort, it's about survival. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, human rescue teams faced the full wrath of the storm. Gale force winds tore at their suits, and debris rained down like deadly missiles. Yet they pressed on, their determination unwavering. One team, led by a young officer named Clark, found a Venari settlement on the edge of a collapsing cliff. The storm had already claimed half the village, and the remaining Venari were too weak to move. Among them was a mother clutching her child, her eyes filled with desperation. "We're getting you out of here," Clark said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. He and his team worked quickly, carrying the frail Venari to the shuttle. Just as the last of them were aboard, the cliff gave way, sending rocks tumbling into the abyss. Clark barely managed to leap to safety, his hand gripping the edge of the shuttle's ramp as his team pulled him inside. The Venari mother watched in disbelief as Clark stood, brushing off dust. "Why?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Why do you risk so much for us?" Clark looked at her, his expression calm but resolute. "Because it's the right thing to do. That's all that matters." Back on the human flagship, news of the rescue efforts spread. The Venari who had been saved so far were astonished by the humans' commitment. In their culture, survival often meant sacrifices, leaving the weak behind to save the strong. But humanity refused to follow that logic. "We don't leave anyone behind," Commander Reed told the Venari leaders during a briefing. "Not if we can help it. That's how we survive, and that's how you will too." As the humans pushed forward, their supplies dwindled. Food, water, and medical equipment were stretched thin. Despite this, the crews shared what they had, often going without meals to ensure the Venari were cared for. Some began to question whether they could continue. But every time doubt crept in, another rescue shuttle would return, filled with Venari who had been moments away from death. Each life saved reignited their determination. The storms grew worse, and the challenges mounted, but humanity refused to back down. To the Venari, the humans were no longer just rescuers. They were hope itself, shining in the darkest of times. The rescue efforts on Anora had become a race against time. The planet's surface was breaking apart, and the solar storm's intensity increased with every passing hour. Human shuttles darted back and forth, carrying as many Venari as they could to the fleet. But with each trip, the risks grew greater. Commander Reed stood on the bridge of the Solace Asterisk, the lead ship of the human fleet. The holographic map of Anora showed the planet's surface covered in red zones, areas too dangerous for shuttles to enter. Yet Reed's voice was steady as he gave orders. "Send another team to the southern regions. There are still survivors there." Lieutenant Gray hesitated. "Commander, our pilots are pushing past their limits. We've already lost 2 shuttles to the storm. If we keep this up—" "We don't stop," Reed interrupted. His voice carried the weight of every life depending on them. "Those people are counting on us. I won't let them die because we were too afraid to try." On the surface, the situation was desperate. Rescue teams were spread thin, and every mission was a gamble. In one sector, a shuttle piloted by Captain Mason was caught in a violent windstorm. The craft shook violently, alarms blaring as debris pelted the hull. "Hold steady," Mason shouted to her co-pilot. "We're almost there." Below them, a Venari village was barely holding together. The fragile buildings crumbled under the storm's assault, and the Venari huddled together, too weak to move. Mason landed the shuttle with a jarring thud, and her team sprang into action. As they loaded the Venari aboard, a young technician named Ellis noticed a small figure trapped under rubble, a Venari child. Without hesitation, Ellis rushed to free the child, ignoring the wind that threatened to knock him off his feet. "Hurry up, Ellis," Mason called. "The storm's getting worse." "I've got him," Ellis shouted, lifting the child into his arms. He sprinted back to the shuttle just as a massive gust of wind sent a tree crashing down where he had been moments before. Back aboard the Solace Asterisk, the rescued Venari were given food, medical care, and a safe place to rest. Many of them had never seen humans before, and their reactions were a mix of awe and confusion. "Why do they risk so much for us?" one Venari elder asked. "Even their own council abandoned us." Dr. Lane, who had been working non-stop in the medical bay, overheard the question. She paused for a moment before answering. "It's simple. To us, every life matters. It doesn't matter if you're Venari, human, or something else entirely. If we can save you, we will." The strain on the human crew was evident. Pilots were flying missions on little to no sleep. Engineers worked tirelessly to keep the ships running, and medical staff were overwhelmed. Despite this, no one complained. In the mess hall, a group of tired crew members sat together, sharing rations. One of them, a young communications officer, spoke up. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." "We'll keep going as long as we have to," another replied. "That's what we do. That's what makes us human." The Venari, watching the humans push themselves to their limits, began to realize the depth of their commitment. These strange creatures, who owed them nothing, were willing to sacrifice everything for them. For the first time since the crisis began, hope burned brightly in their hearts. But even as the humans fought to save every life, the storm raged on, and Honora's time was running out. The question wasn't just whether the Venari could be saved. It was whether humanity's unyielding determination would come at too great a cost. The storm over Honora had reached its peak. Ferocious winds ripped across the surface, carrying shards of rock and debris. The human fleet, hovering above the chaos, worked tirelessly to coordinate rescue missions, but every trip now felt like a gamble with death. Commander Reed stood on the bridge of the Solace Asterisk, his face tense as he monitored the latest reports. Every shuttle that returned brought news of survivors, but also of the growing danger. One rescue team hadn't reported back in hours, and the chances of their survival were slim. "Commander," Lieutenant Gray said, approaching cautiously, "we're running out of shuttles. 2 more are grounded with engine failures. If we lose many more, we won't have the capacity to evacuate everyone." Reed didn't look away from the map. "Then we use what we have. Pull engineers off other tasks if needed. Get those shuttles flying again. But at this rate, I know the risks, Lieutenant." Reed's voice softened, but the determination in his eyes didn't waver. "But these people need us. Until the last Venari is safe, we don't stop." On the surface, the rescue teams faced horrors the likes of which they had never imagined. Lieutenant Clark's team had landed in what was once a thriving Venari city. Now, it was a wasteland of collapsed buildings and rising floodwaters. Clark's team moved through the wreckage, their suits battered by the relentless wind. They found small groups of Venari huddled together, many too weak to stand. Clark's voice came through the comms. "We've got survivors. Start loading them onto the shuttle." As his team worked, a deep rumble shook the ground. Clark looked up to see a nearby dam beginning to collapse. The floodwaters it held back were already spilling over, rushing toward the Venari, and the humans trying to save them. "Get them out of here now," Clark shouted. His team rushed to carry the Venari to the shuttle. One soldier hesitated, looking back at Clark. "What about you, sir?" "I'll be right behind you," Clark said, motioning for them to go. Clark stayed behind to help a Venari elder who had fallen and couldn't walk. He lifted the frail figure into his arms, his boots sinking into the rising water. The dam gave another groan, and a wall of water surged toward them. Clark sprinted toward the shuttle, water crashing against his legs and nearly pulling him under. With a final burst of strength, he leaped onto the ramp as the shuttle took off, just seconds before the flood consumed the area. Aboard the Solace Asterisk, the mood was grim. Every rescued Venari was a victory, but the human crew was reaching their limit. In the medical bay, Dr. Lane worked tirelessly, her hands shaking from exhaustion. She looked at the Veneri lying on the stretchers around her, children, elders, and families clinging to life. One Veneri, a young girl, took her hand and whispered, "Thank you." Lane smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "You're going to be okay. We'll get you all out of here." Meanwhile, in the engineering bay, Carter and his team worked frantically to repair the damaged shuttles. "We need these ships operational in 10 minutes. Carter barked, sparks flying as he welded a broken fuel line. His assistant, a young mechanic, looked up. "We're running out of spare parts." "Then improvise," Carter said without hesitation. "We don't have the luxury of giving up." As the humans pushed themselves to the brink, the Veneri began to see them not just as rescuers, but as something extraordinary. A Veneri elder, watching the humans work tirelessly, turned to one of the younger refugees. "These humans," the elder said softly, "they fight for us as if we were their own. They do not abandon the weak. They do not fear sacrifice. Perhaps they are stronger than we ever imagined." But the storm showed no mercy, and as the fleet counted its rescued, the humans knew they couldn't save everyone. Every decision now carried a heavy price, and time was running out for Honora. The storm showed no signs of slowing. Honora's skies were painted a deep, angry red, and the planet's surface was barely recognizable. Tornadoes of fire and debris tore through once thriving cities. The human fleet hung in orbit, a fragile beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Commander Reed's face was grim as he listened to the latest report from Lieutenant Gray. "We've evacuated over 60% of the Veneri population, sir, but there are still thousands left. The storm is intensifying, and the planet's crust is destabilizing. If it collapses—" Reed nodded, finishing the thought. "We'll lose everyone still down there." He paused, his gaze locked on the holographic display showing the dwindling safe zones. "Send out the last wave of shuttles. Push as far as you can. I want every Venari we can save aboard this fleet." On the surface, the rescue teams were stretched to their limits. Each trip was more dangerous than the last. Captain Mason and her crew were deep in the northern mountains, navigating narrow canyons filled with choking dust and falling rocks. Mason wiped sweat from her brow as she scanned the area. "Thermal scanners are picking up survivors in that cave," she said, pointing to a jagged opening halfway up a cliff. Her co-pilot frowned. "That's a death trap, Captain. One wrong move and the whole cliff could collapse." Mason's jaw tightened. "We've come this far. I'm not leaving them behind." She grabbed her harness and led her team up the unstable cliffside. Each step sent small rocks tumbling down, and the wind threatened to throw them off balance. Reaching the cave, they found a small group of Venari huddled in fear. "We're here to help," Mason shouted over the storm. "Follow us." The Venari hesitated, their wide eyes filled with doubt. One of them, a mother clutching her child, finally stepped forward. Mason extended her hand, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Trust me, we'll get you out of here." Back aboard the Solace Asterisk, the fleet was running out of space. The medical bay was overflowing, and every corridor was filled with Veneri refugees. Dr. Lang and her team worked tirelessly, treating injuries and comforting the frightened. A young Venari boy clung to Lane's arm. His thin voice trembled as he asked, "Will we be safe?" Lane knelt down, her exhaustion hidden behind a warm smile. "Yes, you will. We'll take you somewhere where the storm can't hurt you anymore." The boy nodded, his small face filled with fragile hope. In the engineering bay, Carter and his team faced their own battle. Another shuttle had returned with damaged engines, and time was running out to repair it. "We don't have the parts for this one," Carter muttered, wiping oil from his hands. One of his team members spoke up. "We could strip parts from the auxiliary systems on the Solace Asterisk. It'll leave us vulnerable, but it might get this shuttle operational." Carter hesitated for only a moment. "Do it. We'll make do up here." Those people need that shuttle more than we need backup systems. As the humans continued their relentless efforts, the Venari began to take notice. Word spread among the refugees about the sacrifices the humans were making. A Venari elder, seated beside a window overlooking the planet, turned to a group of younger Venari. "They give everything for us," the elder said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Even when it costs them dearly, they refuse to turn away. Perhaps their strength lies not in their weapons or their technology, but in their hearts." Commander Reed stood alone on the bridge, staring out at Honora. He knew the fleet was nearing its breaking point, but he couldn't bring himself to stop. Every moment spent saving lives was a moment closer to disaster. "Commander," Lieutenant Gray's voice broke through his thoughts. "Final shuttle wave is en route, but there's a high probability they won't all make it back." Reed's hands tightened into fists. He closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them with renewed determination. "Then we'll make sure they have every chance. No one gets left behind, if we can help it." As the final wave of shuttles dove into Honora's storm-ravaged atmosphere, the human fleet braced itself. The cost of their mission had been high, but their resolve remained unshaken. They would save as many as they could, no matter the price. The final wave of shuttles descended into the chaos, their engines roaring as they braved winds strong enough to tear apart lesser ships. The Venari, still trapped on the surface, watched in awe as the human crafts pierced through the storm, their lights cutting through the suffocating darkness. For those left behind, hope clung by a thread. Inside one of the shuttles, Captain Mason stood at the cockpit, guiding her team toward the last safe zone marked on their map. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The storm's tearing everything apart faster than we expected. No delays. Load as many as we can and go." The pilot glanced back. "If we wait too long, Captain, we might not make it back." Mason nodded grimly. "I know, but we're not leaving until we've done everything we can." On the ground, the Venari, who had taken shelter in a crumbling temple, began to emerge as the shuttle landed. The humans rushed to meet them, carrying supplies and stretchers for those too weak to walk. Mason's voice carried through the comms. "Move quickly. This storm isn't going to wait for us." A Venari elder approached her, his voice trembling. You came back for us, even when everyone else abandoned us." Mason gave a tight smile as she helped him onto the shuttle. "We're not like the others. We don't give up on people, no matter how bad it gets." Elsewhere, Lieutenant Clark's team had their own challenges. They were retrieving survivors from a dense jungle now being consumed by violent quakes and fissures. Each step was treacherous, the ground splitting open without warning. Clark and his soldiers formed a chain, guiding Venari through the shifting terrain. A young Venari child stumbled, crying out as the earth cracked beneath her. Without hesitation, Clark scooped her up, carrying her toward safety. "Keep moving," he shouted to his team. "We don't stop until everyone's out." As they reached the shuttle, a massive quake hit. The ground buckled, sending debris flying. One of the soldiers shouted, "Lieutenant, we've got to leave now." Clark handed the child to another soldier and turned back. "Not yet. There are still more coming." Through the chaos, more Venari emerged from the jungle, their faces filled with desperation. Clark waved them forward, his voice cutting through the roaring winds. "Come on. We're not leaving you behind." Aboard the Solace Asterisk, Commander Reed monitored the rescue efforts, his face etched with worry. Reports of damaged shuttles and increasing casualties poured in. Lieutenant Gray approached him with an update. "Commander, 3 shuttles are still on the surface. They're running out of time." Reed's jaw tightened. "Can we send backup?" Gray hesitated. "The storm is too strong. Any additional shuttles we send now might not survive." Reed closed his eyes, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. "Then we hold position. If they can make it back, we'll be ready." Back on Honora's surface, Mason's team finished loading the last of the Venari onto the shuttle. As the engines roared to life, the ground beneath them began to collapse. Mason grabbed the pilot's seat, shouting, "Take us up now." The shuttle lifted off just as the temple crumbled into the abyss. Mason leaned back, her chest heaving with relief as they broke through the storm clouds. Clark's team was the last to leave. The jungle behind them was now a sea of fire and collapsing terrain. The shuttle's engines strained against the violent winds, but it pushed upward, carrying the last of the Venari to safety. Inside, Clark collapsed into a seat, exhausted but triumphant. A Venari child clung to his arm, whispering, "Thank you for not leaving us." Clark managed a tired smile. "We don't leave anyone behind. Not ever." As the final shuttles docked with the Solace asterisk, a wave of relief washed over the fleet. The human crew worked tirelessly to tend to the rescued Venari, their exhaustion overshadowed by the knowledge that they had done everything possible. Commander Reed stood on the bridge, watching as the last shuttle docked. Gray approached him with a small smile. "They made it, sir. All of them." Reed exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. "Good. Now let's get out of here before this storm takes us down with the planet." The fleet began its ascent, leaving the dying world behind. Honora was lost, but the Venari people were not. And for that, the humans had proven their strength, not through power, but through compassion. The human fleet soared away from Honora, leaving the planet behind as it was consumed by storms and fire. Inside the ships, a fragile silence hung in the air. For the humans, the rescue was a success, but the weight of what they had witnessed, the destruction, the suffering, was impossible to ignore. In the medical bay of the Solace asterisk, Dr. Lane moved among the Venari refugees, checking on injuries and offering comforting words. A Venari elder sat up weakly on one of the cots, his expression a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "You saved us," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 lives. "Even when it cost you so much." Lane paused, meeting his gaze. "We couldn't just leave you behind. That's not what humans do." The elder nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Others saw us as weak and unworthy. But you saw us as people. That is a strength far greater than any weapon." On the bridge, Commander Reed stood at the large viewing window, watching Honora shrink into the distance. Lieutenant Gray joined him, a datapad in hand. "Status report," Reed asked without turning. Gray glanced at the datapad. "All shuttles accounted for. Final count. We managed to save 93% of the Venari population." He hesitated before continuing. "We lost 3 crew members, though. They didn't make it back to the shuttles in time." Reed closed his eyes, his hands tightening into fists. "They gave their lives so others could live. We'll honor them." The silence stretched for a moment before Gray added, "Commander, the Venari Council has requested an audience with you. They want to thank us in person." Reed gave a small nod. "I'll meet them soon. For now, let them rest. They've been through enough." In one of the common areas, the Venari refugees gathered to process the events. Families huddled together, comforting one another, while human crew members passed out blankets and food. A Venari child wandered toward a young human engineer who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, tinkering with a small machine. The child watched curiously before asking, "What are you doing?" The engineer smiled, holding up the device. "Fixing one of our scanners. It got damaged during the rescue." The child tilted his head. "Why do you help us so much?" The engineer thought for a moment, then said, "Because everyone deserves a chance. We help because it's the right thing to do." The child smiled back, a small spark of hope lighting up his weary face. Later, in the central hall of the Solace asterisk, the Venari Council addressed the human crew. Their leader, a dignified woman with silver markings on her skin, stepped forward. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. "Humans," she began, You came when no one else would. You risked everything to save us, even when it meant sacrificing your own. We owe you our lives, our future." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Your compassion is your greatest strength. It is a lesson we will carry with us as we rebuild." The crew broke into quiet applause, their tired faces brightened by the words. As the fleet entered a safe zone, far from Menora's destruction, plans for relocation began. The humans worked with the Venari to find a new homeworld, promising to help them rebuild their society from the ground up. Commander Reed addressed his crew one last time before the mission officially ended. Standing in the briefing room, his voice carried the authority and warmth of a leader who had seen the best and worst of what humanity could do. "Today, we proved that humanity's strength isn't just in our technology or our endurance. It's in our ability to care, to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. We've set an example, not just for the Venari, but for the galaxy. Let's make sure we live up to it." The crew responded with a cheer, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. In the weeks that followed, the Venari began to adapt to their new homeworld, guided by human advisors and aided by their technology. The bond between the two species grew stronger, forged in the fires of Anora's destruction. For the Venari, humanity became more than just allies. They were protectors, friends, and the ones who refused to abandon them when all others had. And for the humans, the rescue was a reminder of their own resilience and a testament to the power of compassion in a galaxy that often forgot its value. Together, they faced the future with hope, ready to build something new from the ashes. Months passed since the rescue of the Venari. The humans and their alien allies had settled on a lush, uninhabited planet known as Elara. Its wide green valleys and shimmering oceans offered a stark contrast to the chaos and destruction of Anora. Here, the Venari began rebuilding their society with the help of the human crew. On Elara's surface, a small human-built settlement stood near the Venari camp. Engineers worked tirelessly alongside Venari artisans, blending their technology and traditions. The sounds of construction, laughter, and the hum of life filled the air. Commander Reed stepped out of his temporary quarters, breathing in the fresh air. He watched as a group of Venari children ran past, chasing a small hover drone controlled by a young human. Their laughter was infectious, and Reed couldn't help but smile. Lieutenant Gray approached him, holding a datapad. "Good news, Commander. The final shipments of supplies from Earth have arrived. The Venari Council also wants to meet later to discuss the next steps for governance." Reed nodded. "We'll help them establish a system that works for them, but it's their future. We're just here to give them a foundation." Gray hesitated. "Do you think they'll make it, after everything they've been through?" Reed glanced toward the Venari camp, where families work together, rebuilding homes and planting crops. "I think they'll thrive. They've shown incredible resilience, and now they know they're not alone." In the Venari camp, the elder who had spoken to Dr. Lane during the rescue addressed a gathering. His voice, though soft, carried strength and determination. "We were once a people who lived in fear, abandoned by those who called themselves our allies. But the humans," he gestured toward the nearby settlement, "they showed us what it means to stand together. They gave us hope when we had none." The crowd murmured in agreement. Nearby, Venari youth worked with human scientists, learning about sustainable farming techniques and medicine. The collaboration was seamless, as if the two species had always been destined to find one another. Meanwhile, in the human settlement, Dr. Lane oversaw the construction of a medical clinic. Inside, a team of Venari healers trained under human doctors. One of the Venari, a young woman named Helen, approached Lane with a question. "Dr. Lane," she began, her silver markings glinting in the sunlight, "why did you humans help us when no one else would? Surely it would have been easier to leave." Lane set down a box of supplies and looked at her. "You're right. It would have been easier. But humanity has a saying, we're all in this together. That doesn't just apply to humans. It applies to everyone." Talon tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. You see unity where others see division. That is rare. Lane smiled. Maybe. But if we can inspire others to see the same, then this galaxy has a chance. As the months turned to years, Allura became a symbol of hope across the galaxy. News of humanity's unwavering compassion spread far and wide, challenging other species to rethink their views. The Venari, once seen as weak and insignificant, became a beacon of resilience and unity. In the heart of the settlement, a monument stood tall, a simple structure made from Venari stone and human steel. Inscribed on its surface were the words, *, no one is forgotten. No one is left behind. *. Commander Reed stood before the monument during a quiet evening. The stars above glittered like scattered diamonds. Beside him, Talon, now a leader in her community, stood silently. This place, she said softly, isn't just a home for the Venari. It's a lesson for the galaxy. Reed nodded. It's proof of what we can achieve together. Talon glanced at him. Do you think others will follow your example? Reed looked up at the stars. Maybe, maybe not. But if they don't, we'll remind them. Humanity doesn't give up. As the wind carried the sounds of laughter and life through the air, Reed felt a deep sense of pride. The humans and Venari had built something extraordinary, together. Allura wasn't just a new beginning for the Venari. It was a promise to the galaxy that compassion, courage, and unity could overcome even the darkest of times. Years had passed since the humans had saved the Venari and helped them build a new life on Allura. The once devastated world had become a thriving home, full of hope and promise. Humanity's reputation spread across the galaxy, and many species began to see them as more than just a military force. They were symbols of compassion, unity, and resilience. But the peaceful world of Allura was about to face a new challenge. It began with a message from the Galactic Council. The Council, a collection of the most powerful species in the galaxy, had heard of the humans' involvement in the Venari's survival. They were curious and concerned. While many viewed humans as a potential ally, others were unsure of their growing influence. Commander Reed, now a respected leader among the humans, stood before the gathered crew, preparing for the visit. His brow furrowed as he read the message. "We've been summoned to meet with the Galactic Council," Reed said, his voice steady. "They want to see for themselves what we've been doing here on Allura. The Venari have become an example, and some of the council members want to understand how we did it." Lieutenant Gray spoke up. "Do you think they'll accept our methods, Commander? We didn't follow the rules. They didn't ask for our help. We just did what we thought was right." Reed nodded. "I don't know, but it's not about what they think. It's about showing them the truth. What we did here wasn't about power or politics. It was about doing what was right." The day of the meeting arrived. A fleet of ships from the Galactic Council landed on Allura's surface, their sleek designs shimmering under the twin suns. Leaders from various species disembarked, each wearing the symbols of their people. The largest ship, a towering vessel of silver and blue, landed in the center of the human and Venari settlement. The councilors stepped out, their eyes scanning the scene. Human engineers working alongside Venari farmers, children playing, and the bustling sounds of a community rebuilding. At the front of the gathering stood Reed and the Venari elder, who had become one of the most influential leaders of his people. As the council members approached, the elder bowed his head respectfully. Reed did the same, though his posture was more casual. Councilor Zorn, a towering figure with skin, the color of polished obsidian, stepped forward. "Commander Reed, we've heard much about your actions on Allura, and since then, we wish to understand the methods that allowed your people to form such a partnership with the Venari." Reed spoke with calm confidence. "It wasn't just our methods. It was our belief that every life is worth saving. We didn't ask permission to help. We acted because it was the right thing to do." The councilors exchanged uneasy glances. Zorn raised an eyebrow. "And do you believe your methods will work on a larger scale?" Will you intervene when other species face extinction? Reed stood firm. If they need our help, we will be there. But only if it's for the right reasons. We don't seek power or control. We only want to help those who can't help themselves. The counselors remained silent for a moment, clearly taken aback. Finally, a counselor from a race of floating beings with translucent bodies spoke. You do not seek dominion over others. You do not want to impose your will on the galaxy. Reed's gaze was steady. No, we just want to show the galaxy that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is show kindness. As the meeting continued, the counselors began to understand. The humans weren't driven by ambition or desire for control. They were guided by a simple, powerful belief that helping others was worth more than any conquest. By the time the meeting ended, the atmosphere had shifted. The council had come expecting to see a race hungry for power. Instead, they had witnessed a species with a strong moral compass, willing to stand for what was right. As the counselors prepared to leave, Counselor Zorn turned to Reed. You've shown us a different way. Perhaps we have been too focused on power. We will consider your words carefully, Commander. Reed nodded. It's not about being right. It's about making the galaxy a better place for everyone. The Galactic Council left Alara with much to think about. As their ships vanished into the stars, the people of Alara watched from below. Reed turned to the Veneri elder, who stood beside him, gazing at the departing ships. Do you think they'll change? The elder asked. Reed looked up at the sky, a quiet hope stirring in his heart. I hope so. But even if they don't, we'll keep showing them the way. And with that, the humans and the Veneri turned back to their work, united in their shared purpose, building a future of peace, compassion, and understanding. The galaxy was watching, but the people of Alara knew that the true change had already begun.